right. So here we have tides again, but unlike our first tide question, which had the equation, now we don't have an equation. Oh, I know. It's like the sunset one. We've got times. We know that the maximum depth of water, 8 meters, happens at 4:30 in the morning. And the minimum depth happens 6 hours and 12 minutes later at 10:42. So if we're drawing a picture of what's happening here, our x-axis and our y-axis, 4:30 in the morning. And I'm going to write that as 4.5. Does that make sense? Yeah. We hit our maximum depth at 8. And 6 hours and 12 minutes later at 10:42. What should I write 10:42 as? So if this is 4.5, this looks like about 6 hours and 12 minutes later. 10.7. How did you figure out the 0.7? 42 divided by 60. 42 minutes out of 60 minutes is 70%, or 0.7. So then if we're looking at from here to here, we're actually going up 6.2. So we have a maximum here, a minimum here. Is that going to be one full period? No, we'd have to go another 6.2 more, which will take us to here at 18.9 when we'd hit a maximum again. So we've got our curve looking like this. Yes? Yeah, it should probably be 16 instead of 18. My mental math now is not working wonderfully. 16.9. There we go. Yes. You could even add the values in between if you want. This would be up 3.1, so that'll get 7.6 and 13.8 in between there. Now, part A said graph, which we've done already, and it said find two sinusoidal functions, one with sine and one with cosine, that could model this equation. So again, let's figure out our DAB first, and then see if we can write those equations. Yes? Sinusoidal means that it's this kind of graph, a sine or a cosine graph. And they're called the same thing because you might have realized that a cosine graph is just a sine graph that's been moved left and right. So you could choose either one. So the name for those kind of graphs, sine or cosine graphs, are sinusoidals. What is our D value? What is our center line? It's going to be at 5. So right here through the center is at 5. You could add 8 plus 2 together and divide by 2 to find the average between 8 and 2. That's one way that you could find 5. Or maybe you just could eyeball it and tell. Our amplitude then is 3. Because from 5 to 8 is 3, or 5 down to 2 is 3. What is our period? Our period on this whole thing is 12.4. So our B value is 2 pi over your period, and I'm going to leave it like that. 2 pi divided by 12.4. 12.4 came from because we knew from one maximum to a minimum was 6.2 hours. And that would have to get doubled to get a full period. So now that we've got the dab part, we can write out an equation for sine and cos. Our a value is 3. I'm going to leave space in case we decide. Our period is 2 pi over 12.4. Leave space here. And our d value plus 5. Where does sine start? In the center going up. So we have a couple of choices. You could choose this one or this one. Can someone tell me where that first one is? Close. 1.4. How did you figure that out? How much is it in between here? 3.1. So if you go back 3.1, you'll get to 1.4. So you could use 1.4 or you could use 13.8. Either would be fine. They're both shifts to the right, so you would have x minus 1.4. And where does cos start? At a maximum. That maximum is 4.5 to the right. So there you would have it. Again, I'll get you to graph this. Get this on your graphing calculator so that you see exactly this window. While you're doing it, I'll put it on mine as well. I'm going to go 3 sine x minus 1.4 plus 5. For my window, I'm going to go from -2 up to 20. I'm going to go only up to 10. Now, if you realize you've done something wrong with your graph and it's taking so long, your on button cancels what it's doing. Sometimes when you hit graph and it's going really slow because you've got a super complicated equation in there, and you're on the middle of your quiz and you're like, I gotta fix this and I'm running out of time. That on button cancels what's happening and you can restart. So one of the things I was like, oh, I wanted to make my y scale by 2 just because I'm fussy and I think that would look nicer. So I canceled it there so I could change it to 2. Now I can really see that it goes down to 2 and up to 8 and it makes me happy. So there you have your graph. On part B, it says estimate the depth at 1:30. So if we were estimating 1:30 in the afternoon, where would that be on our graph? What number would we be looking at? 13.5. So what are we going to estimate? About 3? Okay. And then we check it with our calculator by going second, calculate the value, number 1, at 13.5. And it's 4.54. We were better estimators this morning. So that's how you'd find it exactly. But just looking at your graph and estimating 3 wouldn't be bad. There are 2 questions on the page for you to try on your own. Okay? Once you're done those 2 questions, on page, in your homework or in your textbooks, on page 548, you can do questions 3 through 9 as additional practice. There is some of you might have a homework thing listed at the bottom. You can just ignore that. So those ones on page 548 are some more practice questions. But do the ones on the sheet first.